Welcome to Life of Legacy, your key to a better life. I'm your host, Jonathan Lawrence Clark, and we're back today for part two with Jacinta Winston, talking about leadership. Today is our focus, right? We've talked about career advancement, keys to that. We've talked about work-life balance. What role does that play if you want to grow? Can you have a balanced life and still advance in your career if you want to be a leader? So those are some of the things we talked about the last time. But today, our focus is leadership, and Jacinta knows a lot about that as the Senior Vice President of Service Delivery for Randstad. Her career has been on an upward trajectory, steady upward trajectory for quite some time now, and she's kind enough to be with us today and share a lot of her wisdom and experiences with us. So, thank you, Jacinta, for joining us again today.
Yeah, thank you for having me back.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming. So, I want to just kind of summarize a little bit of what we talked about last time.
Okay.
We did talk about the difference between being a just kind of solid intermediate performer versus being a high performer was one of the things we talked about. And what are the differences between the two and how you can separate yourself and become a high performer and what does that really look like? We talked about that in context of work-life balance. Like, does it to be a high performer, does it mean working long hours, always being on? Is there a way for people to maintain and separate their family life from their work life, especially in the remote work world, where a lot of people now in corporate America are working hybrid. Not everybody, but a lot of people are, and have some level of at-home work, whether it's part of the time or solely remote. And a big challenge with that is keeping your boundaries up enough to not have your work life blurred together with your home life and be able to unplug and separate and be able to recharge and handle all your different aspects of your life, right?
Right. All right.
So that being said, as a leader, when you're looking at performance of your team and you're looking at the difference between solid performers and high performers and looking at who's going to advance. A couple of things you talked about. You talked about somebody that looks at efficiencies and thinks strategically, can improve processes, and bringing value in that way versus just the long hours. What are the other keys to someone being a person that you would look at as prepared to advance ultimately into a leadership role?
Yeah, so first of all, I will say not everyone is meant to be a leader.
Okay.
Um, I think we naturally assume that that's the only path to success is that I go up the ladder, I'm an individual contributor, I go from an entry level to a senior, level role, and then I must need to be the supervisor, I must need to be the manager. Like that's the natural step, right? Um, And so when I'm looking for leaders, a couple of things, right, is do you have the heart of a leader? A leader's role is very important, not just from a point of making decisions, but also from knowing how to lead your team. So the what you do is just as important. The how you do it is just as important as the what you do. And so if you from a soft skill standpoint, if you're not able to have healthy dialogue or when you disagree with someone, if you're not able to mobilize your team in emergencies, if you don't have the attributes of being empathetic and understanding, if you're not able to hold others accountable, then for me, those are if not more important than you performing well in your job. It is certainly the skills I look for. Um, the leader's role is to control the temperature of the team. So if you are a leader that is easily emotional, you can't separate the facts that of what you have in front of you right now with where you're trying to go, then you're not going to be successful as a leader. And so when I'm looking for someone, it's not just the what they're doing, it's also the how that we do it. And I know you've heard me say this before. I hate when people say that's above my pay grade. That's
Ooh, yeah, that nails
I
down.
heard it 3 times this week. And it was
Oh,
from
really?
people that were
Wow.
above me. And so I was like, wait, what? um, and I hate that because it's not necessarily I'm asking you to do something as much as I'm asking you to show me you have the potential to do something different,
Okay.
which is very different, right? Why in the world would I ask someone to go ride a motorcycle when they can't even yet walk? Like they need it's a baby or it's someone who maybe have been paralyzed and they're struggling just to learn how to walk again. For me to hand them a motorcycle and say, go at it, what did I use that decision? It's not setting them up for success. And so when I hear people say that, I'm like, oh, but how do I know you're going to be able to do that? Because you haven't showed me anything that you're got some base level skills to get that done. So it's just one of those. What's my pet peeve? We all have them, right? So
Yeah.
so that's my pet peeve.
Yeah. And probably not just you. Probably not just you. Because you don't, some people think that they wait until they get the job to show that they have the capacity to do the job, right?
Yep.
But you as a leader are looking for signs that a person has the capacity to take on the job before they get promoted, right?
Yep.
Uh, and
And
then,
tenure doesn't equal those signs. I've seen many people, myself included, who've been promoted over folks who've been with the organization much longer than I have. Um, and I think people just think, well, I'm sitting here doing it, then
yeah,
you should promote me. I should have been next in line for that role. And that's when I think you have to turn it inside out and look at yourself and say, well, what did they do differently than what I did? Or what I'm doing, and even ask that of your manager. If say, help me understand what I could have done better to make myself available for the next promotion. Understand you've made the decision on this one, but how can I make myself the next one? Then when you're looking in the pool of promotion, that it's me.
right. Where do you think that comes from? Like the mindset that, okay, if I'm here for X amount of time in a job, then I'm gonna get promoted just for the fact that I've been here.
So I've been in the work field for quite a bit of time, right? So have experienced manufacturing and different things, and I think if we think about the evolution of leadership, it used to be way back 30 years ago that you did get increased and you got promotions based on your tenure. So if you had been here for 1 year, you got a certain amount of pay. 2 years, you may have gotten a quarter increase, and 3 years, and so on and so forth. So it was very structured. And so, in that respect, you knew, okay, once I've been here for a year, I'm going here. And if I've been here for 5 years, I'm going here. And the thought of the influence of the leader, I don't think was very much considered. I think that's a recent last 10 to 15 year evolution. I think companies realize that the effectiveness of my team really depends on the leader. And so if my leader doesn't have the soft skills and they can't influence, then I'm not going to get the level of productivity that I really need from this team. The culture isn't going to be great. The overall environment, people are going to be, I'm going to have a high turnover because it's people leave leaders, they don't leave companies, right? And
Okay.
so I think that culture of I'm here really hasn't left some people, and it unfortunately it's the product of what you've seen. And if you've never seen anything different, or even if you've seen it, if you don't believe in yourself that you can do it differently,
Hmm.
then you're still stuck in that mentality of, well, if I just sit here and I keep doing my job, someone will say, oh, they're dedicated and I need to put them in a leadership position. So we really have to, whereas corporate America has changed, we haven't necessarily seen all employees or all generations of employees change with it.
Okay. So the expectation of what it means to be a good leader has evolved. Eh,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so now, since we've identified what constitutes a good and effective leader within the organization, that comes with skill set, a certain skill set that might not always be hard skills, right?
Yep,
That a person should have in order to lead others and not just be able to execute the work themselves.
absolutely.
And so, what is the company's responsibility to communicate to the employees what those expectations are to become a leader? Because if you're entering the workforce, right, you go to college, you get a degree, you go into corporate America. If no one tells you that you need to develop these things in order to be considered for leadership, and you're just working and you're doing the best you can, hard worker, punching in, punching out, you're doing your job well. Nobody's told you you're not doing your job well, right? And then you're there X number of years. That person might expect some sort
Yep,
of increase advancement if nobody's said to them, these are the requirements if you want to enter leadership, right?
right.
So let's talk about company's responsibility, employees' responsibility when it comes to having an understanding of what it takes to advance. Can we talk about the balance between the two and who's
Abs-
responsible for what?
Absolutely. I think as a company, you have to first be clear on the culture and the climate that you are seeking to create. And I think about, back in the day when you were, and I'm guessing they still do this, when you rented an apartment, right?
Mhm.
And so, you got what you can afford. People do that today, still get what they can afford, but it doesn't mean that the apartment management was the greatest, right? You would call for a work order, something needed to be repaired in your apartment. It may be weeks, months, whatever that you before you got a response.
Okay.
But then someone bought that complex and you would see a big sign under new management, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why they would have done that, if you really think about it, is they want you to know that they look different than what they did before.
Okay.
So if everything was working optimal and it was the environment that they wanted and they changed management, they would have never put a sign up. They don't want you to know anything was different.
Yeah. If the branding was great and the great reputation, they want to take advantage of that, right?
Right.
Okay.
But if it changed, they put a sign up because they want you to know it's different and your experience with me is different.
Hmm.
And so I think as a company, you have to first, if it's a new company, it's easy, right? So if you're a brand new company, you can imagine the culture you want to create. And from the beginning, you can say, I want our employees to feel value. When I say value, it looks this way. They have a freedom of opinion. They can raise it in these forums. I want them to have opportunities to participate in events outside of work to build a sense of community. I want our employees to be able to have a compensation level at this, above industry or right at industry. Like you can set all those things at the beginning. You can set what that structure, what you want, and then build upon that. So if you know you're looking for a company culture that has a high compensation level, okay, well then that is going to influence how you price whatever your product is so that you will have that money to then seed those things because those are your core values. If you are a company that is more mature, and we see this with companies all the time. You and I have seen it with Randstad over the years. We've refocused. Strategies have changed as we've had different CEOs. But the biggest thing about that is that's when you see that under new management sign is I want you to see me differently. And what that means is that you have taken an opportunity to say, let me look at where we are today and where I want us to be. And then what is that disparity? What is that gap?
Hmm.
And when we talk about company responsibilities, is whether you do it at the beginning or if you do it later on in the evolution of the company, making sure to tell employees that is important.
Okay.
Because as much as I'm coming to work for you, you are exchanging some soft and hard things to me. I'm not just here because of a paycheck, because I could go to any other company, but it's the environment in which I work that is causing me to be here versus there. And so for me, the question of, does the company have a responsibility? Absolutely. If you don't make it very clear, hey, it's going to be hard for me to promote you into this role because I've noticed every time things get tough, you go take PTO for 3 weeks and you leave everybody here to fight that battle. I don't feel a sense of team from you.
Hmm.
Or when things get tough, you tend to yell and scream until people just kind of cower down. They don't feel included in the decision. All of those things are very important for the company to communicate to you, the employee. And that comes through the leader.
Okay. All right. So I heard a couple of things there I want to touch on. And when you mentioned the PTO, you're talking about obviously the PTO is there for people to take, but how you go about preparing for that time off to make sure that the business is in a good space while you're out, especially if you're a critical resource, is very important, right?
Absolutely. And more specifically, I have been in environments, I won't name the company, where things were getting tough or we knew a project was coming up and all of a sudden the person who we needed most, oh, I'm gonna take PTO. I don't want to be here. Or I'm gonna take a leave of absence because they knew they could do that. And I'm like, every time something comes up, you bail. Like, is that really and they themselves just weren't ready for difficult things. And so I
Yeah.
give that example because it's happened to me. I'm like, hey, every time we get in crunch time, you take flight.
Yeah. And then if this is somebody who wants to advance and you're thinking about, okay, who's going to be prepared to advance into leadership, you definitely don't want a leader who's not there during the most critical of moments that you need the person, right? That you need the opposite, the person that when the chips are down, you can count on me to dig in and roll my sleeves up and get in there and do everything that needs to be done, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. And what the other thing I wanted to go to was employee value proposition because a lot of what you're talking about is
Mhm.
related to that. What is the value that an employee gets from the organization that would cause them to want to work for your company and to
Mhm.
remain at your company so that you're maintaining low turnover, right? Keeping people with you long enough to build that institutional knowledge of your company that the
Mhm.
company's going to reap benefits from as that person learns the organization, its systems, its structure, the people, builds relationships. It behooves the company to hang on to those high performers who have been there and know all those things because it's valuable, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
but in exchange for that, you need to provide value to your employees and that's not just the pay, right?
Mhm.
You can't pay well, but then when it comes to all the other elements that make a workplace attractive, neglect those things, and then conversely, you can't make up for pay that's not going to give them the ability to take care of their families and do what they need to do. You can't make up for low pay just by saying, "Hey, we got flexibility. You're able to take time off, right? Because they still have to pay the bills. So there's a balance there, right?
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
looking for a total package. And of course, the company has a budget, how much we're making. There's other considerations there as far as what they can do in all those different areas and benefits and packages they can offer and things like that. So when you look at it from a total comp perspective, the company has to look at the business to determine what that looks like. But I do think that it's important for organizations to consider the whole person when they're thinking about their employee value proposition. And then also, what type of culture do you want in your company?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think we undermine those decisions that companies make in creating that employee value prop, right? To your point, everything that you do is going to take some element of money. And it may not be hard dollars, right? It may not be, I'm going to offer this level of benefits, so I'm going to pay this percentage of it. But it may be, in order for me to create this culture, I need this level of leader. And so my exchange of that is I've got to elevate what I'm requiring, right? So there's I think sometimes we view it as hard money sometimes, and it's not always that clear. It is,
Yeah.
I'm going to take a chance on this, fresh out of college graduate and see if they will thrive as an analyst in this environment or whatever it may be, because now I'm looking for the fresh ideas. I'm looking for someone who is not confined by a box. And I think, when we talk about the employee value proposition and we connect that to the employee's responsibility, it's being clear on what you're looking for as well, right?
Right.
So in this I guess this stage in my life, there's companies like Chick-fil-A at their corporate office. I don't know if you studied them at all, but they have daycare on premises. Well, that may be really, really important for someone with small children, or who maybe they're new to the area. They really don't, know any other areas. But for me, that wouldn't be something that would be high on my list. And so the responsibility for you as an employee is to know what you want. What things are important to you, and does your values align with the values of the organization in which you are choosing to work for?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. 100%. So, and people's expectations of their workplace are much different than they were decades ago, right?
Yeah. and
Yeah.
and to your point, the workplace is home most often, right? And I'm seeing this evolution, and I don't know how far it will go, but as employers are realizing, I need to have you come into the office for some period of time.
Hmm.
I think that has changed the culture and the climate as well, because employees have become accustomed to working from home, their own controlled environment. And that brings a whole different set of challenges for a leader when you bring someone in the office and their soft skills, their, facial expressions, the way they approach the work, being able to sit next to a peer, all of that is now coming into play, and it brings a whole nother set of unique challenges for leaders, because it's, hey, this person is great behind the screen, great on the output, but then if I put them in a real life, face-to-face scenario, they seem to just tank. And so, if you know that those are things that you struggle with, then that's going to be important for you in knowing what that company's culture is. Is it completely remote? Is it hybrid? If it's hybrid, what's the level of interaction, or whatever that may be? So some of those things have evolved and will continue to evolve as we grow just in how we do business. My husband and I were having I don't know, it was a very interesting conversation the other day, because we were talking about the Jetsons. Did you watch the Jetsons when you were
I
a kid?
remember the Jetsons. Yeah.
So we're talking about the evolution of work and the Jetsons, and George Jetson got up every morning. Rosie made breakfast. She did everything. And Jane was there, but she really, as a mom, she really didn't have to do a lot. Rosie did everything, and then the Astro and the kids and everything else. And so we were discussing, what did the people really do? Like, there was AI, there were bots that were, he didn't even have to drive to work. He got
Right.
in the car and drove him there. He talked on the screen with his boss. He went in the office, which was funny to us. He went in the office to get on the screen with his boss. You never really saw that. And so when we talked through that, we were talking about, like, where does that leave the human part of it? And whereas we picked up all the technology from shows like the Jetsons, because you don't see a lot of people displayed in those shows, and that and Inspector Gadget. I gotta throw that one in because I love Inspector Gadget. But because but because you didn't see people, I think we are struggling as we evolve. And what are those values we should still be looking for? And how do we evolve as companies and as employees in this digital evolution? So it was a very interesting conversation. If you're one never seen any of those cartoons, I would say go watch them first and then think, compare them to where we sit now from a technology standpoint, because it seems so far-fetched when we were kids watching it that now it's here and it's like, oh, okay, now what do I do with it? And who am
Yeah.
I? What's my identity in the middle of it?
Yeah. No, true. Yeah, because it is technology that enables us to have these virtual work situations. Um, and it's a different dynamic. It requires a lot more structure from a managerial standpoint because everything has to be so much more intentional in your
Yes.
interactions when it's virtual. You can't just you're in an office. There's all these other communication styles that are there, the nonverbal cues, and being able to pull somebody aside as you pass them in the hallway and ask a question and walk over to somebody's desk, and all those different aspects are there. But when you're virtual, you don't know what that person's doing unless you're in a virtual meet with them, right? So trust is like huge. Trust is so important both ways. Trust of your leader, but also trust of your team members that they are getting everything done, uh, and not playing video games or off somewhere on the beach, right? So yeah, and you made me think too when you talked about, okay, the person was great when I interviewed them in the meet, right, virtually, but then when I saw them in person, it was quite different. It makes me wonder, like, how much should we make if the job is hybrid, should the interview process be hybrid? Should you not just interview them in a Google Meet virtually, but also have them come in if it's feasible and
Yeah.
interview them also face to face, have them meet other colleagues? What do you think? Right, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on maintaining that in-person aspect when you're making a decision before you hire somebody?
Where feasible, I think you should. I have been hired completely remotely before, way before the digital age. We weren't even in the same state, and that person had never worked at the location I was going to work. So they had no idea about the environment. And I remember the first couple of days going into the office, and I was like, "Where do I go?" And they were like, "I don't know. I've never been to that office before." And so I was like, what do I do? And the people that I interacted with, it was never the person that hired me. And so there's something to be said about seeing someone in person, putting them in that environment. A lot of people, our soft skills, our patience has decreased. Um, and social media is good and bad. You and I have a mutual friend that I've been following her socials here recently. I generally don't do that with people that I'm currently working with, but they are posting videos for labs that are kind of, I don't want to say spoofs on the work environment, but it is.
Okay.
And so I was like, this is exactly what happened. Somebody did this kind of as a spoof or a funny, but people picked this up as this is how you're supposed to work in a work environment. And so they're great on camera. Oh, anybody can fake anything for 30 minutes, right? But then you put them in an 8-hour workday face to face, and all the patience dissipates. You mean I got to sit here and eat lunch because maybe lunch isn't just in the break room. I've got to go through traffic. I've got to go through all these different things. And it changes the person you see. Some people they do really, really well at it, but some people it's not their cup of tea. My son is in sixth grade, and they had their way of approaching this was kind of really, really ingenious, I think. So he has classes, of course, 5 days a week. Well, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, his last two classes of the day become his first two classes of the day. So
Okay.
they swap the day. And I said, what's the why, as a parent, like, what in the world?
Before.
And they said, we find we get a different kid when we swap the days. So a kid who usually has math or science at the end of the day, it's not a class that they are particularly interested in. They've gone through a lot of other stuff the beginning of the day. You swap math and science to be the beginning of the day. And now I've got an engaged kid. I've got a kid who's excited to learn. I've got a kid who now grasps concepts. And so to the question about seeing them in different environments, I think you have to. You have to see how they behave and what's more comfortable for them, because as a leader, that means I may not give you the more stressful task on your in-office hybrid days, because maybe I see you're more calm on your remote days and you get a lot more accomplished. So maybe that tailors how I set your deadlines if I can, because I want to align them. Or maybe I want to say, hey, I know this is a big project and you need some quiet time and you really don't need the interaction time with others. Can we swap your work from home day so that you can focus on this? So I think it's important.
Interesting. A very, very intuitive perspective too, from a leadership aspect, that you would pay attention to those little nuances, right? Because you're, again, we talked about what is true leadership, what is the value of that, and that's getting the most out of your team, right?
Yeah.
To achieve goals, and also helping them achieve their personal goals in the process where it
Yeah.
aligns with the company goals. Yeah. Uh, so paying attention to those things could enhance and improve your ability to get the max performance out of your team, right?
Hmm.
Very interesting. And I didn't mean to go too far off on a tangent there. Started talking about technology. I thought you were going to go into AI for a minute. I was like, we're going to need like another hour to talk about AI.
Yeah, I
But
love some technology. Don't.
yeah, we'll have to come back to that another day. You mentioned the Jetsons, and I was when you said the Jetsons, I immediately thought the Flintstones, because I think they're was it
Uh,
are they both was it Hanna-Barbera or something
I
like that?
think so. Yeah.
All right.
Hanna-Barbera wrote a lot of, produced a lot of the cartoons from our day. We
Yeah.
won't say what year from our
The
day.
Flintstones is the opposite direction as
It
far
is.
as technology. This is not related at all, but I they go hand in hand for me when I think about the cartoons. But anyway, I digress on that. All right, so also wanted to ask you, because you had mentioned earlier you started to talk about the employees part in the employee value proposition and assessing, what their needs are and what they need back from their organization. Let's talk about the employee's responsibility, because we talked about the company's responsibility to communicate what their
Mhm.
expectations are culturally, professionally, right? This is who we are and what we do as a company.
Yeah.
And if you want to elevate, this is what's expected. What is the employee's role when we talk about advancement, contribution, performance? What is the employee's role in that process? Because you've approached your career from a very empowered position, right? Very intentional about how you navigate your career. And I think a big challenge for some people that find themselves behind where they would like to be, and wanting to advance and wanting more from a pay perspective, from a title perspective, and it's not seemed to happen. I think maybe sometimes they don't approach it with the same level of intentionality and strategy as you have, right? So let's talk a little bit about what is the employee's role in their career advancement and development, and what are the keys, like some of the little tips and things as for how they should approach their
Mhm.
career goals and making sure that those happen versus putting it entirely in the hands of the company and the manager.
Yeah. The answer is pretty much in the question, in that it's your career. It it's not theirs. It's yours. And so because it's mine, then I have to be clear on what's important to me, what brings me joy, what are the things I'm really, really good at, what are things that if you said you will do this for the next 5 years of your life, that I would still be excited about, right? Um, and for me, that's step one. Like step one has to be defining myself.
Okay.
Um, and that may not be who you are today, right? So who you wish to be may not be who you are today. Because I think all of us will say if you're not saying I'm going to say it for you, all of us can grow in some way.
Absolutely.
We've all got the propensity to grow.
Yeah.
And so you got to be clear on who you want to be and what that looks like for you. So it's and don't define it, don't box yourself in with a title.
Hmm.
I, I tell people all the time, I don't care what you call me. One, as long as you call. So you can call me whatever you want to, just call. But two, but two is does it meet what my goals were financially and personally? So if you pay me my desired income level and you call me the janitor and my job is to go and make strategic plans, I don't necessarily care about the title. But if you're a title person, then that's going to change your appreciation or your level of um, comfort with your role. So,
Okay.
first thing is identify what your career looks like in terms of title, responsibilities, those things, right? Also, ask questions and not just of your leader. Everybody has, at some level, a HR department. You can ask your leader, but you can ask your HR department too if your leader doesn't have the answer, which is, are there established competencies for these roles? So, regardless of what the responsibilities are, everybody in this role needs to be able to do this, right? And if they don't have it yet, the beautiful thing about the internet, and I know we said we weren't going to talk about technology, but the beautiful thing about the internet is that you can search on those roles that may already be posted with other companies and see what do you see the common threads of competencies are. So even though it may not be organic to your company, maybe that you see the same five things or themes repeating. And then you can take that and come back to your leader and say, hey, I know I asked you for this and you didn't have it, but I did some research on my own and other companies are looking for these things. Would you say that's the same thing you would be looking for this role? So again, you owning it. And if they say yes, then here's your responsibility. You have to look at that and say, do I even want to do this? Are these competencies that align with who I am? Like core of who it may be on there that I have to work with other cultures and religions. Organic to who you are, you may say, I really struggle with dealing with other religions. I'm so, embedded in this is who I am, this is my identity that I don't want to hear in any other cultures. Well, what that says to me as a leader is you may struggle from a respect level working with other people.
Hmm.
And it also says to me that if an employee comes to you and says, my religion or my culture dictates that I do X at this time of day, that you won't afford them the opportunity to do that because it conflicts with what you think of as morally right. And so you have to really think about, as a leader, am I really ready to see all of that? And am I really ready to treat that employee as a whole person and not enforce my own values on them? So, first responsibility is clear on who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Second is figure out what the competencies are for the role that you are seeking to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I encourage everyone, I actually encourage all the leaders that come into my team when they first come over, is to do a personal SWOT analysis. So, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are opportunities that you can build on? And what are threats? Now, what that question used to look like back in the day was, tell me one thing that you don't like about yourself. I used to hate that question. I don't know if I don't know if you ever got asked that question, Jonathan. You can go to an
Yeah.
interview and they would say, tell me your best qualities. But then they start swapping it and saying, tell me the worst things about you. I'm like, what I tell you that? Like,
Yeah.
but I do think it makes sense for you to be clear with yourself
Okay.
on what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what are opportunities and what are threats. Your strengths you want to maintain, but you also want to make sure that things that you say are strengths, you got to get you, and it connects to my other one is get a mentor, is get someone who knows you and make sure that's actually a strength.
Hmm.
Like it, because sometimes we think higher of ourselves than what we're displaying to others.
Yeah.
And so it's good to be able to bounce that off someone. And then the same token with a threat. I've had people to come up to me and say, I'm sorry, with weaknesses. I've had people to say, I really am not doing a great job in these spaces. But what they display to me is success in those roles.
Hmm.
And so then we have a conversation of why do you feel like you're failing here?
Yeah.
And so once you are clear where you want to go, you're clear on what the job has, you've got your SWOT analysis. Now you got to roll up your sleeve and you got to put in some work. You
That
you
part.
you you know where you are, you know where you want to go, and you have a roadmap of the things you're great at and you're not so great at. And
Hmm.
now you've got to put in the work. You've got to work on your network. You've got to talk to people you've never talked to before. You've got to find a great mentor. You know, I'm a big supporter of mentors. Um,
Absolutely.
you've got to get a mentor that is just completely confident in what they see in you and be able to call out bad and call out good. You got to find somebody that can be that transparent with you. And then this one I'm gonna add only because I feel like it's a new evolution
Hmm.
is you got to clean up your socials.
Hmm.
Like I said it earlier that I choose not to have people in the if I'm currently at an employer, I
Hmm.
don't want those folks connected to me on social media. LinkedIn is fine. I don't view that as a personal social. Um, but Facebook, I don't even have Instagram. But if you had Instagram, Snapchat, all those types of things, you, I'm not going to say don't invite them because I feel like this later generation, they're so connected that it's new for me. But if you're gonna be connected, be mindful that your socials, though you think they are your own, they are not your own. You are always representing not only yourself, but your family, any organization that you're attached to, both current and past.
Yeah.
And I think we say, well, that's my personal space. I can say what I want to say on my page. You can, but you have to then deal with the consequences of that. And
Yeah.
that I think people have heartburn with. Um, but you will be surprised how many people are connected because the world is really small. It's big, but it's small. And the reason why I say clean up your socials and why I added it is because I've heard people, thinking, oh, it's a friendly banter conversation with me. And maybe they say something about somebody else. They don't know I have a personal relationship with that person.
Hmm.
I'm very protective of personal relationships. But you've spilled everything. And so if you're going to be on socials and you're going to say, my boss just said this, or, my coworker did this, or whatever else, uh, or even your opinions on different things, which it's election season, Jonathan. People are losing friends.
Oh, yeah. That's a sticky one.
People are losing friends all over the place.
It is happening. It is
It's
happening.
happening. And it happens every election season. Every 4 years, you see this roller coaster
Hmm.
of people you thought you really knew. They differ from you in opinion. And then that I will say usually around, I've seen it this week. So I usually see it around October. People say, well, you can unfriend me or unfollow me. If you don't like what I'm saying. So you gotta see that roller coaster. But if you, depending on where you are seeking to go with your career, you gotta clean that up. You it's not off limits. It's a personal page. But it's also a private, a
Public.
public page. And so you've got to clean all of that up and make sure that if someone is looking for you to be in a leadership role with their company, they don't have a reason why you are not, because you've put in the work. You've expanded your network. You've worked on the things that you identified in your SWOT analysis. You know what the competencies are. You've made your request known to your leader that you're working on these things, and you've got a great mentor.
Okay. Okay. You said a lot there, Jacinta. So and put myself in the mind of some of the viewers, right? It sounds like a lot of work.
It,
It sounds like a lot of work because first you said, okay, know who I am. So and then you get familiar with who I am. What are my strengths and weaknesses? Because you talked about the SWOT analysis and what are the opportunities and threats. What are the competencies and skills required for the career and the job that I want? So I have to research that. Then I have to figure out what development opportunities are available for me to get from who I am to who I need to become from a skills and competency standpoint, and soft skills standpoint. So now I got to research all this development stuff, right? I got to do that. Then I have to watch what I say online and social media, and I can't just post whatever I feel at the moment. I have to be careful about that. It seems like a lot of work, Jacinta. I can't just punch in and do my job, and then the company reward me with the promotion and a pay increase.
why would they?
Hmm.
What have you shown as an investment in yourself that tells them they need to invest in you?
Fair point.
It's a lot of work, but it's investing in you. And the one thing you can't, that they will never be able to take from you, the company could close down, the role could be eliminated, but the investment you've made in yourself continues on. So it's not wasted work. You're
Okay.
improving yourself. And so if you're not going to work on improving yourself, then why would I?
Yeah. Okay. Fair point. And you know what? I would add something else to that that could help for some people put it in perspective. A lot of people have had the experience of having a bad manager, right? And you have that manager, and that manager, they don't know how to treat people. Um, they they might know how to do the work really well, but their navigation of others and relationships and helping you with your career is very lacking, right? So they don't have that skill set. That happens. Then you have people that when they don't know the job and the intricacies and the skills as well as you do, and they're in a leadership role, they're insecure about it. So they might you might feel like they're blocking you, right?
Mm-hmm,
Denying you opportunities because they're trying not to, they don't want it to be known that you maybe know more about some of the stuff than they do, and they're
mm-hmm,
insecure about it when their real job is to get the most and not to know the most, to
yeah,
get the most out of you, right? Because they're in a leadership role. So that happens. So everybody's had some experience with a bad leader. Some people are abrasive, all these different things, right? Your experience with leaders who you would classify as not being a good leader is directly connected to what you're talking about, because the evolution is still occurring in terms of identifying what good leadership is and
mm-hmm,
building the skills necessary in people that are promoted into leadership roles. It's not all the way there. They're still in pockets and probably lots of places, not just pockets. Uh, People getting promoted because they've done their individual job well and they've been with the company X number of years, and that's the next logical step for that person in the job hierarchy. So they make
mm-hmm,
that person a leader. They haven't had any training, any leadership training for how to manage other people, right? And maybe lack some of the skill sets and competencies required to be an effective leader, but they promote them just because they were good at their job, right?
yeah,
So being someone who's been on the other end of a manager who was not equipped to be a leader, it should give you an understanding of why you should go above and beyond to develop the skills that would make you an effective leader, and not just think because you punched in and done your job well that that's enough for you to advance in leadership,
yeah.
right? So I'm just kind of flipping that perspective a little bit because you don't want to be the manager that you had that you dreaded working for.
Yeah.
You want to be much better than that. So, and part of that comes with you taking the initiative, taking the ownership to be the leader that you think your leader should have been for you, and to build those skills necessary for you to be effective.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that too. I think some people don't think about it that way. They just think, I've been here, it's time. But it's a lot more than that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a bad leader can slow your progress, but they shouldn't stop it. They so if you're working on yourself, they may be in a position to decide if you get the role with that organization. They don't decide if you find a comparable opportunity with another organization that you'll be now more polished or ready to move it and make that step.
Yeah.
And I think, going back to the question of why people think they just sit in the seat, it used to be people would work for the same company for years. That was the thing. I've been working at this company and it's class reunion season, right? So we just had a class reunion. And the big thing is I've been working for the same company for 22 years. I've been providing for my family. I'm stable. And for some people, that's okay. But I was like, oh, that's about the same amount of time when we left school. That's
Long time.
that's a long time. And what are you doing? Oh, I'm just still doing the same thing I was doing then. And that may be okay for that person.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are a leader, if it is within you, then sitting in that space without movement is going to be so uncomfortable for you that you have to move.
Hmm.
You have to.
Yeah.
And that's really when you know you're a leader. If doing the same thing over and over and over without opportunity to grow is the landscape of where you are, it's like it burns you. It's like we got to go somewhere. We got to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, everybody can't be the leader at that one job.
Yeah.
So you may have to leave. I am very I'm a stickler for having a very good org structure in terms of the ratio of FTEs to leader. And so whereas there are people who may be seeking for leadership roles, I'm very clear with them. I don't have a leadership role right now. It doesn't mean you're not a great leader. It doesn't mean you don't have the skills. But if your goal is to move into that role in the next 30 days or whatever that looks like, I don't have it. And unless someone that's currently sitting there leaves, I don't have it. And so then you have to make a decision as an employee. Is it causing me so much? Like my drive and my desire to be in this role is so strong
Mm-hmm.
that I then need to leave to go find who does have that role for me.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that it won't leave you alone. Like if you know you're supposed to be a singer, you sing everywhere, right? You sing in the shower, you sing in the car, you do all the things. And if someone told you you'll never be able to sing again for the rest of your life, even though you have the ability to do it, but I don't want to hear a single note pass out of your lips, it would crush you.
Mhm.
Because the thing that brings you joy, you're not permitted to do it.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Let's talk about people that maybe haven't perceived themselves as leaders, but might have all the qualities that would make them a good leader.
Okay.
And maybe they don't have the dream or the itch to be a leader because they've never looked at themselves that way. It could be because they haven't had examples of what leaders are enough to aspire to it. If you're from certain communities, you might not have examples of people that look like you that are in those seats and those type of leadership roles. So you might have never envisioned it even, right?
Hmm.
Or uh, maybe just don't have the confidence at that moment. Like you have the qualities, but you just like who am I to tell or direct the activities of other people, right?
Hmm.
If you're that person, right, and maybe you have what it takes and you just don't realize it, what guidance do you have to that person to I guess have the courage to step into it or to be able to see themselves in a different light?
Yeah, I think that goes back though to Jonathan being your career. Just because others see it in you, if you don't have a desire for it, then redirecting your career journey to be that person may not bring you joy.
Okay.
The best career I got advice I used to get early on in my career. I don't know if I would have I don't know that I knew the word mentor at that time.
Hmm.
Um, but it was an employee who had been with the organization for 31 years. I was 27 at the time. He had been there longer than I had been born.
Okay.
Great leadership qualities. We would often talk about different scenarios. He gave great advice, had different perspective, had strategic leadership perspective, but he wasn't a leader. And I asked him, I said, why weren't you hired for this job instead of me? And he said, I don't want the pressure of that. I enjoy being able to come in, complete my role, go home.
Okay.
He says, if you had asked me that 20 years ago, probably would have felt differently. But right now, that's not what I want to do. He said, even if you told me you double my salary, it's not something I'm interested in.
Hmm.
So even though he had everything, I mean, if you were looking for a model manager, you could check it off. If I was out of the office, my out of office had to contact him. Great. I mean, I spent 6 years learning from him, but he never wanted to be the one with the title of leader. And then he also added, he said, just because I don't have the title doesn't mean I don't have the influence.
Wow. Okay.
So title, again, going back, it's your career. What do you really want? You can have everything. I mean, you and I both have passions about different things outside of our careers, right? Um, you may love to paint, or you may, be great at basketball or whatever else, but that doesn't mean that you then pivot your dreams and say, I'm going to go into the NBA.
Yeah.
It's what brings you joy, even though others may see things in you that you don't yet see. If it's not time for that to bloom and take off and take flight, then you keep it in the back pocket of your mind until something propels you or changes you to do other.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And that's a good point. It might not be for everybody. It's not a negative thing. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's one path versus another, one trajectory versus another. Sometimes other people can make you feel like you're underachieving if you're not uh somebody's boss. Like if you've been doing something for a long time, you're not somebody's boss, then they're like, oh, that's all, right? Like it's like a status thing.
Yeah.
So and culturally, some cultures are really adamant about that, right? Like it's very important to be in charge of
Yeah.
other people, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's not the best fit for you or it doesn't make you happy. So I'm glad you made that distinction because it might not be for some people. And you know what? I have a question about that. But before I ask that, I want to ask something else too. So for that person that maybe hasn't seen themselves in that light, it could be for that person. Would it make sense for that person to talk to their manager about maybe leading some projects or leading some initiatives to test the waters and maybe even go through some leadership development trainings just to see if they like it before they actually get promoted and if they have a knack for it? What are your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, I would, if it were me, I would have a real conversation with my leader to say, can I just shadow you for a bit? Can you talk to
Okay.
me about what your day looks like?
Okay.
Uh, I'm really, I'm starting to learn some of my strengths are in these areas, and it would lead me down this path. But before I jump all in, I'm not really sure I know what you do on a day-to-day basis, and it's not a negative thing. I'm just not in those spaces. So
Mhm.
can you create an opportunity for me to work with you or shadow with you, or if not you, is there somewhere else? Because sometimes as leaders, we're in meetings that are making decisions about teams that you can't bring somebody alone.
Yeah.
So it's not that you don't want to help seed, but you got to be protective of where you are. But I think getting a real day in the life will help you before you jump into a project. Like just ask the question of, hey, can I see what that really looks like if I pursue that? And then I'd love after I do that, can we talk about what my next steps may be? And then I would introduce the topic of if there's a project or if there's, something coming up that would help me refine these skills. But I think you got to first get a good bird's eye view of what it looks like.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think the shadowing thing makes a lot of sense because that can give you a lot of perspective, right? Um, it could scare you off depending on what you
It
see,
could.
potentially, right? And then to, I would say, still maybe testing the waters and dipping your toe in maybe some leadership hats without actually having the full responsibility. And I say that, Jacinta, because you might shadow and you might look at that and be like, there's no way I could do that, right? Because it's a difficult job. But if you had the training and there's a process to getting to that level, right?
Mhm.
And they're not seeing all the development that you have been through to be able to do what you do on a regular basis to get there. They're just seeing how tough your current job is. So I,
Yeah.
I think maybe having that direct experience might be beneficial to someone who's maybe got a leader that's encouraging them to go into leadership, but then they're reluctant, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to do it, but maybe just wearing the hat a little bit, getting some little trainings in and seeing, do I even enjoy it? Having that firsthand experience is probably the best indicator of whether or not it's something for you or not. That's just my 2 cents to kind of to
Yeah.
kind of add to that.
Yeah. I have a little bit of a love hate with training, in terms of leadership training,
Okay.
only because I can give you all the tools, but it's up to you to exercise them.
Oh, 100%.
And I've seen some, I've had some high performers that wanted to go through the leadership training, and we sent them through it. They come out of it and they were like, that was all great, but I'm not going to do any of that. And so you kind of feel as a leader, why did I invest in that?
Right.
But if nothing else, you would hope that they come out with a higher level of appreciation for their current leader.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to go into leadership training twofold, which is growing yourself, but then understanding the perspective of those in charge of you, in order for it to really be impactful. So that's why I say I have a love hate for it, because I think sometimes people go in and say, I'm just going to check this box. They told me I have to take this class to go to this next step, but they don't really adopt any other principles that they were actually
Yeah.
exposed
That
to.
happens quite a bit actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. People come out of a training and not be any different than when they went into it. It does happen.
Yeah. And you're like, what in the world? Didn't you cover this? Like,
Yeah.
what is
But
going
but
on?
you know what though? There's some leaders send people into trainings and expect them to just come out and be a different person and be able to handle stuff without the transitional part of learning how to apply the knowledge.
Yeah.
That's an extension of the training. Like you can't have one without the other.
Yep.
And as a leader, it's part of your responsibility to help them integrate that training and that knowledge into their day to day. So I think that's partially the leader's responsibility to support them in that, even though they have to take the initiative to do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, man. So we have a few minutes left. There's a couple of topics I wanted to cover before we wrap up.
Okay.
One I wanted to ask. So we talked about people that maybe leadership isn't for them. What does growth and impact look like for somebody that doesn't want to lead other people?
Yeah. So I think we talk, leading people is very much a vertical growth path. So one role after another. I don't know that we spend a lot of time are talking through horizontal growth, which is for me just as important. So am I expanding my knowledge? Am I growing into different spaces that um, maybe I was connected? So if you think about a SIPOC, so maybe I was the supplier of the information before, but I didn't know, you know, ultimately how what the output was. So I was missing the I and the P. Horizontal growth is just as impactful. And there are certainly a ton of successful people who are not leaders, who are SMEs, who are process engineers, who are um, problem solvers, project managers, who are able to take a problem and solve them, but they're not necessarily the leader of the team. And so I would say that that is certainly an area to look at. Um, there's also consultancy,
Okay.
right? And we don't talk about consultancy a lot. And I would tell you before you jump and venture down that path, check your HR policy to see if that's even permissible, because there are some companies that don't wish you to do anything outside of the organization that you are in. So you need to know what kind of agreements you sign. But there are people who are looking to grow where you are, or who's trying to grow the maturity of their company to levels that you've already achieved, and would really benefit from someone with your skill set that can come in, work on a project or optimize something for them, and then you move to the next project.
Okay.
Um, that was something I actually thought years ago. That's what I wanted to do. I really wanted to be a consultant. I wanted to go into the government and do it. I think every time I go renew my license or my get my car tags, I'm like, this can work so much more efficiently. And so, um, so it's something that I wanted to do for many, many years. But that consultancy is still a very lively thing that can be done. And then a lot of people have found in this digital age that platforms like podcasts and developing courses, self-deployed courses through different platforms are also a great way to grow and get brand exposure and to really stretch yourself to meet those intricate needs that you have to just still grow and still be impactful. And it can also supplement from an income perspective. What I have done for the bulk of my career is use the tools that I have in other organizations I may volunteer in.
Okay.
I am a proud sister of Swing by Swing Social Fellowship Incorporated, not to be confused with a sorority. We are a fellowship of sisters, and I have, over the last 12 years that I've been a member, I've led the community service portion of our chapter. I've been the treasurer, I've been the vice president, I've been president. And so it still exposed me to be able to grow in different spaces doing that. Um, in
Is,
our
is
church,
that
my husband,
is that Atlanta based or is that national or?
it is national. I did become a member here in Atlanta, but it is a national organization. You can look us up. And if you are a woman who is looking for opportunities, then certainly reach out to a chapter, get plugged into events. We really try to be impactful in the community, serving the underserved, making sure we create opportunities for people to grow in terms of their career, their finances. It's really just a great fellowship. I have enjoyed, even on business travel, I'll reach out and say, hey, any sisters live in this area? And when I'm on business travel, yeah, I'm here, and they'll come pick me up. We'll go to dinner and just have a great time of fellowship. So it is A lot of people akin us to sororities. I've noticed now on on HBCU sites when they're spotlighting the sororities and the fraternities, I will see the swings there or the grooves, who are our brothers, Groove by Groove. It is an international organization. I'll see them put us in the lineup with the sororities and the fraternity. So I am not a great stepper or a stroller. However, our organization does do that as well. So if you happen to search, you will see that as well. But I've chosen to seed organizations like that. My husband and I have been directors at our church for the last 15 years.
Ooh,
So I've been able through that. He and I, we've started a lot of programs there. So we started the college ministry, we did the couples ministry, and seeded that, and got to plan big events and training programs for that. And any of our logistical things that happen, like if we're moving locations, we're over that, setting it up, calling in contractors to get the look and feel just the way we want it to. So we've been able to kind of see things there. And I've been able to actually dip my toes in things that I didn't even think I could, right? Our church is building a new facility. So we're building our first facility.
okay.
And we were over the capital campaign. And so because we were over that, we have been able to purchase our land debt free. But now that we're in the building phase, I actually drew out the layout for our new church. I'm not an architect, but I was just like, oh, let me try this out. And so it's afforded me the opportunity to grow in some spaces and to try out some things. So back to, if you think that's something you want to do, then maybe some nonprofit organizations will really kind of help with that and seed that. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the African Heritage BRG, that I was afforded the opportunity to be kind of part of the startup of that and led for quite a few years. And being able to dream the impossible dream and the things that we were able to accomplish. So it doesn't always have to be in corporate America that those things that are kind of driving you, that you find a way to get those out. It could be through a nonprofit that either you yourself start or that you join or become a member of, that you are able to exercise every good and perfect gift that has been given to you.
Yeah. You know what's great is to hear that you have such a rich life, getting involved in a lot of different things and trying new experiences. And to hear that someone with your level of success is that well-rounded and that balanced, is very encouraging, I
Yeah,
think, and
thank you.
refreshing, because sometimes people have the idea that they have to give up everything else to achieve that level of success. So it's great that you're kind of leading by example in that regard by making sure you're leaning into every aspect of Jacinta Winston and all your different areas of life, and from family to community and service and all those different things. So
Thank you.
I
Thank
want to
you.
say thank you for sharing your experiences, wisdom, and knowledge, your journey. I think people can get so much from this conversation that we've had. I could talk to you forever, but I got to give you back to your family at some point. So uh, hopefully you'll promise to come back and talk to us again, because you touched on technology a little bit. So I know we could probably talk about that. We talk about AI. I want to talk about diversity and leadership because we didn't really get there yet. So hopefully you'll come back a little while down the line
Absolutely.
and talk to us again.
Absolutely. We'll love to. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. With that, take us home. Closing question. What does leading a life of legacy mean to you?
Oh, wow. Wow. I love that question. So, my legacy, I was exposed to the dash moments. I don't know if you ever heard of the dash. So
Okay.
we are
I have not.
born,
Tell me.
yeah, we are born and then we die.
Yeah.
And the dash is what you do in between. And um, for me, that legacy is, I want people to see someone who saw things and imagined them differently and didn't just sit there and say it could be different, but really took the steps and the courage to try to make them different.
Hmm.
I want my kids to be proud of me. I want them when they're writing books or telling their kids about their mom, that they've got stories that really help them remember the time, and they have a sense of pride,
Mhm.
and they're not ashamed, and that they are encouraged that they can do more because they saw it happening.
Wow.
So I love that.
I love that. Perfect ending. Perfect ending. Thank you so much, Jacinta. Very appreciative. And I'm holding you to it. You're going to come back. We'll talk about some other things too.
Anytime, anytime.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care. Tell your family I
Thank
said hello.
you. We will do. Thank you so much.
All right.